Let me show you about turning in this one, since a lot of people kind of have the same problems. I'll show you. If you need to turn in the Photoshop file, and if you try to upload just the Photoshop file by itself, it's going to be too large for Moodle to handle. Here's how to save it as a smaller version so that you don't have to worry with this. In your Layers palette, it's also in the Layer drop-down menu. You can flatten all of the layers that you have. The reason why it's so big is because you've got a variety of different layers that it all has to save. So we're going to make it one solid layer, and that should be big enough to be able to work with. By the way, if you need to find the size of a file, if you don't know what it is, so for instance, here's my Africa working Photoshop file. Here, if it's in list file, I can see the size of it as being 220 megabytes. That is a huge file. Most Moodle places only take about 60 to 80 megabytes, so we need to get the file size down a lot smaller. Excuse me. So in our Layers palette, at the very top right-hand side, you can click the down arrow. One of the options is to flatten the image and basically take all the layers, everything that you see, compress it down into one solid layer by itself. So this is what I have now. Like I said, you can do the Layer drop-down menu. And somewhere, where is it? There it is, down at the bottom. You can do the same thing from there. When I go to File and save it, or save a copy, I can do Save As. Now check out my new size for this one. Much smaller. 30 megabytes is a little bit easier to upload. So that's what you're going to upload. Keep it as a Photoshop file and upload that flattened Photoshop file to Moodle. The second thing, I do want you to print these off. So this needs to be printed on tabloid paper. I'll show you how to print one more time. Under File, you can go down to Print. This will bring up our dialog box. By default, since I've printed before, it's got 8.5 by 11 already loaded up. But if you need to change the paper size, this is where you go under your print settings. It'll open up another dialog box. And you should be able to see everything from here. Here's my paper size. I can change it to letter or to tabloid with that. If you don't see this, yours may pop up looking a lot like this. Very compressed, just kind of the basics. So if you don't see all of your details, page sizes or anything, choose Show Details, or on some computers they may have a little drop down arrow off to this side. This will expand it out and give you full range. Make sense? Do make sure you got your name on yours so I know whose is whose, and I will work it out from there. Alright, so I'm going to hit OK. Won't print that since we don't need to from there. For the other one, let's see. So for this last project that we're working on, you're touching up and editing a variety of photographs for a menu. One of the last things it's going to get you to do is to take several pictures and create what's called an HDR photograph. What did HDR stand for? How many of y'all? High dynamic range. What does that mean?
Exposed enough, and the ones like normal, you put them all together.
Okay, perfect. That's a good description of what it is, but why do we want to do that? What's the reason for having multiple exposures? Let me show you the ones that they give you. First of all, they give you a picture of this watermill. And the reason why it's, quote, not a good picture is because the dark areas are very dark. I can't get a lot of details out of them. And the light areas are almost too blown out. So they're giving you a underexposed one, so the light areas are not so blown out. Let's see if I can get the other one. This one's a little bit darker. And they're also giving you a much lighter version of it, so now I can see these shadow areas a whole lot better. But why? Why do we want to do this?
So you can get all the details.
All the details. You're literally going to merge them together, and you get what's called a dynamic range of lights and darks from this. I'm not going to do this one, but I'm going to show you another one that I found online. Let's see, where's my... There's some great websites you can go to. Actually, let's Google HDR images. And you can find some really cool effects. This became popular just a couple of years ago, especially since digital photography has come out and a lot of people are getting into this. How many of you have seen photographs kind of like this? They almost look very dreamy. The colors are super saturated in some cases. You can go too far and it'll start looking almost like candy. But in this case, I can see good details in the clouds and the shadow areas. Usually if it's nature photography, the clouds kind of give it away if it's a good dynamic range. If you've ever gone outside and tried to take a photograph, the sky is the most blown out thing. But to be able to see lights and darks within the sky, especially things like this, would be very, very difficult to photograph. I love going doing cars, these types of things. So here's an HDR photo. This would be very difficult to do because it's in motion. Usually when you do these, you got to set it up on a tripod so that each of the pictures is exactly in the same spot. If you ever go to the Ag Museum, take pictures of their cars that they have, or if you go to a car show, you can do some really cool pictures like this. But here's how they do it. I've got these samples from a great website, easyhdr.com, and you can download some example overexposed and underexposed photographs, and you can see what they would look like. So this is where I got these particular ones. You can take some yourself if you know how to set up your camera. But I've got this picture, so this is my middle range. If I just did an automatic exposure, this is what I'm getting. You can see that the clouds are very, very white, very blown out. And also the dark areas are very dark, so I'm not getting a good representation of it. If I made it a little bit darker, if I made my shutter speed a little bit faster, you can now see, now I can pick up the clouds, but I'm also losing the shadows. So if I made it lighter, I can pick up the shadows, but the sky is virtually non-existent. So let's merge these together. In Photoshop, under File and Automate, there's a variety of what I call kind of programs within the program. These are little different things that you can do. Down here at the bottom, I'll show you two of them. Let's look at the Merge to HDR Pro one. It'll open up. First thing it'll ask you to do is to find your files. And since mine are on the desktop, let's open those up. These three right here. Open. We'll say OK. And what Photoshop is going to do is open all three of them together, and it'll give you something that looks like this. Now right here, it doesn't necessarily look nice and perfect, so I'm going to have to play around with this to get it looking good. Obviously, that's the sky is really blown out with this one. I can choose which one I want it to be my main. Come on, okay, my main one. Or off to the right-hand side, I can adjust the presets of the exposure and the gamma within here. What I like to do is just play around with some of the preset ones and see kind of what comes up. Let's choose default and see what I get. I'm not getting much. Photorealistic. So now this is starting to fix it up a lot better. Now I can see a lot of details in the shadows. I can also see the details in the clouds that I'm working with. You will start to get this kind of glowing edge off to the side. Some people like it, some people don't. So if you can change the radius or the amount, you can see how much it's changing up. Obviously that's going a little bit too far. With that, change up the strength of it. Let's try surrealistic. Really too much. Okay. Still too far. Looks like photorealistic was giving me a pretty good example from this one. Playing around with this, it's really more of an art than a science. I'll tell you from experience, the more exposures you have, in this case I just did 2 under and 2 over, will give you a little bit better range to play with, and it'll give you a little bit better results when working with these. When I say OK, it's going to take all 3 of them, merge them together, and this is kind of the end result that I'm working with. From here, I could go in with my regular editing tools. I could crop it off. I could adjust the colors, the hue, and the saturation. In my opinion, I think we can bump up the saturation with this a little bit more. Ooh, too much. And that'll make the colors stand out from there. This is what the book is going to step you through on how to do this. Here's one that's not in the book. We're going to do a panoramic shot. Won't save that. So if you ever have to take a photograph of a wide angle, something that's larger than you can actually fit within your own camera lens, what you can do is take multiple photographs and be able to merge them together. So here's one of Kuala Lumpur, this city. So if I took this photograph, this is all that the camera range could fit within one shot. So instead of doing one, I found multiple images backed up, and they're overlapping each other just by a little bit. So here's that, and here's that. So here's this building. Move the camera over just a little bit, and you can see here's the other side of the building. Here's this side of the city. Move the camera over, and here's that side of the city. So you're actually taking multiple shots side by side. A lot of smartphones will do this automatically. Here's how to do it in Photoshop. So in Photoshop, one of the other automating things to do is photo merge. It'll give you this dialog box. There's different ways of merging things together. I just usually keep it on auto so the computer will automatically choose everything that I need. You can also set it to not have any geometric distortion, remove any vignettes. All I'm going to do is keep it at default. Let's browse and open up these pictures. So here's one here. Choose all 5 of them. Open all 5 together. When I say OK, Photoshop is going to open up each individual photo and try to find the areas that are matching up inside of itself. And they're actually going to overlay. So this is the result that I get. Pretty cool, right? All of the images are stitched together. Check out my layers that I have. So on the bottom layer, I have just this photograph, and it created a series of layer masks that are masking over each area. So it finds what areas are in common, places them, distorts them appropriately, and then will mask out the 2 areas to blend them together until it places everything together just like that. From here, if I wanted, I could use my crop tool and then crop off the missing area from this one. So this is the final result that I could work with from that. So if you're standing on the quad, this is what I like to do, and if ever I teach photography, go out on the quad, set your camera up on a tripod, and then shoot several different photographs turning about every 30 to 60 degrees. You can get an entire 360 view of the quad out and from there. Check this out. Here's another question. Notice that it's warping and kind of having to bend the photograph in order to place them all together. Why is that happening? Why do you think that's happening? So if they're stitching together, how come they're not just side by side with each other? Why?
You take a camera and you kind of go in the
Okay, yeah, that's part of it. Anybody want to expand on it?
Perspective changes with every
Exactly, yeah. It has to do with perspective. When you look at the world, you think you're looking at it very, very flat. The truth is everything is going off in a different perspective. Everything is actually kind of rounded. Your mind will warp it to make it look very flat. So if I'm taking a photograph at different angles, each angle has its own different vanishing point. The only way to compensate for that is to actually kind of warp it 3-dimensionally and create this kind of effect once it's finished. So this will always happen. This little geometric distortion is something that's just kind of native to doing panoramic photos. Let's try another one. Here's one of an airport. So in this case, they just took a variety of different pictures very quickly. They weren't even all in line. Let's load them up in Photoshop. File and automate. This one's in the airport folder. Oops. So when I say OK, it's going to look for the common edges between the two. And in this case, this is what I get. So they were taking a variety of pictures. They weren't even all in line. But I can go through here, use my crop tool, crop off the exact area that I want to work with. In this case, hit return. I would probably need to fill that in or do something to fill in that. But it took all the pictures, the information from each picture, found the common edge, and this is what I'm left with. So y'all can go have fun doing that as well. Okay, let's see. The last thing I need y'all to know, like I said, today's the last day to work on the Photoshop project, so everything's due by midnight tonight. If you go to today's class, you can upload everything. Be sure to finish up any of the quizzes that you have. Next week we'll start in InDesign and working with that set of software. I do mean to have tutorials and a quiz for those particular projects. They may not be open up by tonight, but I'll definitely have them open by Saturday so you can be able to finish those up and work through those as well. Cool. Alrighty. I'm going to turn your computer back over to you and let y'all get started.